What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. We're here live before the Monday Night Football game where the Steelers will take on the Cleveland Browns in Ben Roethlisberger's presumed last home game. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. Shane, how you doing tonight?
Well, other than the obvious of feeling kind of mixed feelings about the whole season and everything else, and what we know is likely, like you said, Ben's last game, at least at Heinz Field, uh, definitely mixed bag of feelings right now for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely bittersweet. Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened, all that jazz.
That type of stuff.
Um, Yeah, so we'll get into the news first regarding the Steelers. We'll kind of just break down some of the late breaking injury stuff. So for the Steelers, it seems like Presley Harvin is going to be out for this game. He did not practice this whole week with a non-injury related personal / illness designation. So kind of assuming he's still on bereavement with
Mhm.
that. And Kendrick Green is questionable. He was limited on Saturday, but kind of given the depth chart, I expect he'll be active. Not sure if he'll start though.
Right, exactly. We'll see how they shuffle the offensive line for that.
Yeah, and then Buddy Johnson is out due to injury, and then Devin Bush, Joe Schobert are still on the COVID list. So Steelers are dangerously thin at the inside linebacker position where they're already questionable. So they'll be basically playing some combination of Robert Spillane, uh, Marcus Allen, and Ulysses Gilbert III. So it's going to be
Yeah, we'll see.
quite the cadre of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
at the same time, like as much as it's unfortunate to be in that position, like the run defense has already been so bad. It's like it can always get worse, but can it really get that much
yeah,
worse? It's like
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
someone will be sparked by playing time. Maybe Gilbert will make a play or something like that. We'll
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, they're getting Isaiah Buggs back from the COVID list,
Yeah,
but then Chris Wormley is now on it, so
yeah,
kind of a one for one there. You could probably argue that this is a worse trade off because Wormley's been playing quite well as of late,
yeah. He has
so
been.
that's not good. On the other side of the field, Browns are still dealing with a lot of injuries. They're going to be missing both their starting safeties, Ronnie Harrison and John Johnson III, along with their slot corner Troy Hill, one of their linebackers and one of their linebackers, Mac Wilson, and Kareem Hunt is also out. I think we're still waiting on word from Malik Jackson. So they're still pretty banged up. I'm not sure 100% of who their COVID list is because it's been kind of everybody at one point or another over the last few
Yeah,
weeks. So it's a little hard to keep track.
yeah. I mean, that's been the story of the NFL. Honestly, just the different COVID list situation, and then changing the protocol. So it's now like is our guys gonna be able to play? Like we saw Carson Wentz all of a sudden be able to play, even though he was on the list for a while. It's
Yeah.
a lot of weird stuff going with that. But yeah, I mean, both teams definitely missing important players. I'd say the Browns definitely are in a worse spot just from both an injury perspective and everything else. So definitely, if we're looking at for edges, we do have a little bit more health going to this game than the Browns seem to.
Yeah. And the other part of this is that, and I have a feeling this might have been why the line changed so much. The Browns pretty much have nothing to play for. They've been eliminated from the playoffs. And the Steelers don't exactly have the easiest path, given
Yeah,
given the
unfortunately.
Bengals winning the division. So basically, the Steelers to make the playoffs, they need to win both their games, which we knew. They need the Oh, sorry, that didn't happen. So they need the Chargers to beat the Raiders next week, and then the Jaguars to beat the Colts. I think that's correct.
Yeah, it should be that should be the right amount of things. Yeah,
Yeah, and that
so
last one about the Jaguars and Colts is really the kicker there.
yeah, I mean the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014, but there's a reason why this Jaguars team is
Is that
two
for
and four.
real?
Yeah, they haven't won since 2014. Yeah,
Wow.
and in
Okay.
Jacksonville
Right,
specifically.
right,
So,
right. Yeah. That's
but
crazy.
yeah, because even week one last week, last year, whenever it was the only win, that was the only win that they had
Huh.
was Colts at Jags.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's obviously I'm expecting the Colts to get business handled there, obviously. So unfortunately, that kind of might sink us there. But if the Jags can muster up one win for us, that'd be great. But it's looking increasingly more likely like these last two games are basically it.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement that at this point we kind of don't really want them to make the playoffs, mostly because they really don't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
They're not a good team. They might not be a bad team, but they're certainly not a good one. Um, and basically, if they wanted to get in the playoffs, if they deserve to be in the playoffs, they would have found a way to win any number of games that they lost this
Yeah.
season. Even if just beating the Lions.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one that hurts the most because, like, realistically, Ben plays the game, we win.
Mhm. Oh yeah,
Like, Mason just laid an egg, and
yeah,
really the whole team kind of laid an egg,
yeah.
obviously.
Everybody
But
just yeah.
but it was brutal, just the way that game played out. So that's really the one that I look back at and like, man, we could have been in position to actually have like a legitimate, like good position to make the playoffs, opposed to needing a bunch of help. So
Right. And I think we're also in agreement that like if we'd probably really want them to win this game so Ben can leave home on a good note and then next week is kind of whatever, you know. I mean, the Ravens are also really banged up, you know. It'll be unclear if Lamar Jackson will play that game. If I were the Ravens, I would not play him
no,
in a very meaningless week. I guess there's like an even slimmer possibility they could get in,
uh,
but I wouldn't even risk it with him just because it's, there's really no point for that.
at this point, like you said, it's better to just let him go into the offseason, have the full offseason recover. You don't have to worry about anything else possibly happening to him. And they're already, the way things are going the last few weeks, they're already playing for next year anyway. Like this is a team that needs to reload and get healthy, and then they'll be fine.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, probably.
Yeah,
but,
like I mean, even if they did make the playoffs, like they're not going far, and I think they would just suffer more injuries, so they might just
right.
want to be
It's
like, this just isn't our year. We got to pack it in.
yeah, for them. I mean, their future is definitely bright. They don't have to really worry about it being like a year where if they don't make the playoffs, it's over for them or something. Like they definitely would be better served to just let him play it out. Let him stay on the field, off the field, and just kind of let Huntley finish the string out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned the line moving, and the interesting thing is that I believe like when I started previewing this game, now the line changed again. The
Of
Browns
course.
were favored by at most about 3.5.
Yeah.
And then today I checked it, and now the Steelers were favored by 2.5. Now it's down to Steelers favored only by 1. The over under actually has gone up to 43. It was like 40.5. So a lot of movement in this game.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff going on between both teams. I think like such a part of it too is like it's weird because they obviously it's hard to like quantify this and like especially from a betting standpoint and moving lines and stuff. But I mean, this is likely as we mentioned Ben's last game in Heinz Field. I just have a feeling, and we'll talk about predictions later, but I feel like it's hard to not favor the Steelers in this game.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why the line moved. I think the injuries for the Browns is a
That
part of it.
that's the
I'm
biggest thing.
interested why there's. I mean, the late movement might just be because people are like, the Steelers are still not very good, and
Right.
but
yeah.
yeah. So,
So
with all that covered, I think we'll jump into the other news of the weekend, and that's the latest developments in the Antonio Brown saga. Given that he up and quit on the Buccaneers in the middle of a game, where he took off his shoulder pads, shirt, and threw it all into the crowd, and then kind of jumping jacked into the locker room, and then was trying to go to the airport to get a private plane back to Tampa, then called a different car and was just driving around New York apparently, discussing a Netflix show, he released a song, I think.
yeah, he did.
There's people were saying that he's going to fight the Paul brothers at some point. So it's just, I mean, and a lot of people were kind of saying this is the last straw. The Bucks said they released that was his last game as a Buck. They have not officially released him, so that's an interesting detail that's come of late. So Shane, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I mean, at this point, we know that he needs help mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know that he's not in a good place. And like I don't at this point it's become so sad that I don't really even want to pile on about it because you could tell just he's not right in the head for a lot of reasons. And if this is it for him in football, which I mean, if he can come back from this, I don't really know what to tell people. Like
Mm-hmm.
just at this point I'd say don't even bother reporting anything he does because it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
But assuming he's done, I think it's probably for the best because I'm hoping that once he doesn't have football and he doesn't have people bending to his will as much, maybe at some point down the line he'll get some amount of help that it seems like he definitely needs. But this is just another thing to add to the list, right? I mean, this is who he's been for the better part of the last 4 years.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. And I think it's difficult because we are in this era where people are talking a lot about taking mental health seriously and giving grace to people when they ask for help and stuff. But the issue with him is that he is not asking for help and that he
right,
is actively sabotaging those who are trying to help him.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that at some point people you need to take accountability for your own actions, your own behaviors, and
Oh yeah.
I think, and it's funny, like, I think at this point, we would say like, oh, somebody needs to, get to him. And say something to him. And I think the problem is he's probably surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men who, you know, will find fake vaccination cards for him and do all this crazy stuff. And I honestly thought one of the people that could get to him was Tom Brady.
Yeah,
And I was honestly a little surprised, and I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I think the tack that Tom Brady took wasn't exactly the right one. I think that if anybody were to reach him, it was Tom Brady, and Tom Brady had the opportunity to say, like, you need help. Like instead of like, oh, like we're all thinking of him, like we all hope to help. He gets like, maybe he's one of the people that could actually say something to Brown that would get him to kind of wake up, for lack of a better term. And he didn't do that. And I think it is obviously a very difficult situation, but at some point, I think that, I think he's a danger. I think honestly, he is a danger to one himself and, people that are relatively close to him. He does have multiple children, and I honestly hope that he doesn't see them that much because I don't think he deserves to, and I don't think he should for their safety. Um, but it's just a mess, and he even wished Ben a good game tonight and said he would
yeah,
be
which
coming back
is
for, which is just a wild conclusion to how that relationship
yeah,
exploded.
I don't know. It again, like you said, it's not even so much like I know that a lot of this, like obviously all this is to at least to a certain extent, he's brought all this onto himself, right? Like we
Yeah,
know that. But I feel like football is something that has allowed him to kind of continue to act the way he has, knowing that
I
people
completely agree.
continue to give him chances, right?
Yes.
As much as like you could say, well, if the right team brought him in, or like you said, Brady brought him in, like all this stuff, just because they did that doesn't mean that he's going to take it as, oh, well, these people will help me. He's thinking, oh, is I can keep being myself
I
and
mean,
still
he's
get
had. I mean, well, kind of. He's basically had the greatest player in the NFL history stick his neck out for him
right.
twice. One at extremely great personal sacrifice
Yeah,
to Brady, in that his entire relationship with the Patriots soured. A big reason was because they got rid of Antonio Brown after his sexual assault allegations emerged,
right.
and Brady wanted to keep him, which that's a whole other argument we
Yeah,
could
it's a whole
have.
discussion, but yeah,
But you know, he's had all these people stick their necks out for him. We all kind of believe that Tomlin and the Rooneys and the Steelers did a lot to kind of keep a lot of stuff that we don't even know about quiet while he was
oh
there,
yeah,
and he's burned bridges literally from coast to coast. Um, North, south, east, and west. It's nuts. I think the compare like the NFL comparison. You think about how Josh Gordon has been handled the last few years for
yeah.
kind of relatively petty crimes that haven't really hurt anybody. But I think this is kind of my thoughts with Gordon. And luckily, he has been kind of able to, it seems like, figure it out with the Chiefs. We haven't heard anything yet. He hasn't played
Hmm.
that much or done that much on the field, but he hasn't been, arrested or suspended anymore. But I really thought at some point it was like, listen, like there's something about football that does not agree with Josh Gordon and his ability to stay sober.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that it applies to Antonio Brown, but it seems like football just does not agree with him for now.
At this point, yeah, like that was my main thing. Is like I think football is not a positive force for him in terms of his own personal
Hmm.
mental health. I don't think it's helping him being in the spotlight, being a player in the NFL. I don't think suits his current mental state.
Yeah.
And hopefully teams realize that and they're willing to say, hey, you know what, this guy, if we want him to be a ever be positive to
Hmm.
for the NFL, to ever be a positive force or anything, we need to basically tell him to sit down and not play.
Yeah.
um, I'm worried a team is gonna say, you know what, we'll bring him in. Just I think that that needs to stop at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the NFL teams are really like their primary concern is the mental health of the players, so that's one
Right,
thing.
that's the
But
problem.
I
Yeah.
think that given that we are almost at the playoffs, these teams are gonna be like, all right, listen, we have the guys in the building that we need. We're not gonna kind of bring somebody in who's gonna mess that up at this time. So, maybe he will take this kind of off season to get it together. We'll get into some more positive topics now. Um, we'll talk about this is Ben Roethlisberger's last game at home, so I'll kind of give some stats. So this is from our friend Jarrett Bailey at J Bailey
Mhm.
NFL. Ben Roethlisberger currently sits fifth all time in passing yards, eighth all time in touchdown passes, third all time in fourth quarter comebacks, behind only Brady and Manning. Has the most 500-yard passing games ever, which was a new stat that I didn't know.
Yeah.
The 2004 Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's a six-time Pro Bowler and a two-time Super Bowl champion. According to the Pro Football QB Hall of Fame monitor, he sits at, on their metric, it's the number is
Mhm.
99.11. The average Hall of Fame quarterback has a value of 104. He sits every player ahead of him is in the Hall of Fame except for Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Matt Ryan. Which Ryan being ahead of him was relatively surprising to me, but I think that
The MVP that he has really weighs a
yeah,
lot
the
into that.
MVP, the first team. This thing seems to really value first team All Pros
Accolades. Yep.
because Manning is still ahead of Brady by 0.18, despite
Mhm.
Brady having 5 more Super Bowls.
Yeah, it's really heavily weight because they do focus on like personal metrics, like things that only you
Yeah,
can equate to that player, which
yeah,
I think is generally a good way to do it anyway. But that's
yeah.
beside the point.
But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy
Yeah,
that Brady is still behind Manning in this.
yeah.
But
Well,
I mean,
Manning's like the accolades are just
yeah,
ridiculous from a personal achievement standpoint. So I'm
right.
not surprised based on how they do it that that's the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there aren't in terms of the Hall of Fame quarterbacks behind Ben. There aren't many that are from the modern era. So like Bart Starr, Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach, Dan Fouts are all behind him. Kurt Warner's behind him. Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, and Jim Kelly are behind him, and those guys obviously won. Well, those few of those guys won multiple Super Bowls. Moon and Kelly didn't, but
Hmm.
they've been to a lot of them. So I think that this is kind of he's a surefire Hall of Famer. I think probably first ballot given the statistics and winning 2 Super Bowls. So
Yeah. Yeah, that part I think everyone's kind of known for a long time that he is one. Not only is he a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he's likely going to get it on his first try. I mean, he's very one in general, just as a player, he's very well respected. But also being a Steeler doesn't exactly hurt his chances because we know there's a lot of people that tend to think there's a bias in the Hall for
mhm.
Steelers players. Which I mean, I would just say like if you're good, you're good. But whatever. But
Yeah, I mean that
yeah,
honestly like hurts him sometimes because
it
there are some
can. Yeah.
voters that are like, oh, like, well, I think that's more about the '70s Steelers. They don't want to vote any more of
Yes.
those in because it's
No,
like,
they
oh, it was
don't.
such a good team. Like, it doesn't necessarily indicate that like the great ones are already in, but now we're kind of getting towards the back end of the roster. And
Right.
it's like,
Yes.
were they really good on their own merit, or were they because they were part of the greatest defense in terms of
Which
like
that's
longevity?
fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fair discussion. But like Ben is clearly the best quarterback in franchise history. I know Bradshaw's 4 Super Bowls, but I think we can both agree that Ben is a far better actual individual player.
Hmm.
So he's gonna get in, obviously, and probably like
Yeah.
you said, first try.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to go through is some of our like favorite Ben moments, and they can be games or individual plays or other stuff like that. Pictures and outfits. Ben's fedoras. We can rank those maybe. I'm sure there's enough pictures. But
Mhm.
Shane, what are some of your favorite Ben moments?
The first couple that come off the top of my head, the one play that stands out immediately, just because I've seen it so many times, because I laugh at it every time, is the scramble he had against the Bills. I
Hmm.
forget what year
I
it
just saw
was,
that one
but
today.
yeah,
Yep.
it's the call was great. The escapability of
Hmm.
it's like, yeah,
I think
he's
they said,
literally
"Oh, he's down," and then it's like,
he's
"Oh, no, he's not."
he's
I
just
think
running
that's
away
a
from
Kevin
everybody.
Harlan call, and that's just a
Yes.
perfect call for Kevin Harlan to have
It is.
because
It was perfect play for him to call. Like he's great, but like, and he just gets the first down, but he falls like a pile of bricks at the end. It's so funny.
yeah,
Like,
the one I just
oh
saw
man,
was a touchdown run against the Browns where it was like a 20-yard scramble.
yeah,
And
yeah,
just again, watching Ben run is just very funny because it looks like I think the best descriptor, like, and this is one of my favorite like genres of Twitter is like people describing how quarterbacks run. It
yes.
mostly starts with like Patrick Mahomes and
Or
Kyler Murray because they have these
Kyler
kind of
Murray's
like
the best
funky
one,
little
obviously.
gaits.
Yeah,
But and then obviously old Ben is one thing, but if we're talking about
yeah,
like younger Ben, it's not like he was the most fleet of foot anyways, but it kind of reminds me of like a large kid. Like imagine like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad,
right.
and like he has stolen. This is kind of like I think he like steals like the laundry detergent
Mm-hmm.
containers of
Yep.
beer, and then just imagine him running away. Like that's what I
Right.
think of when I see Ben
Well,
running
like
like that.
Ben had this like for years. He had this tendency, like he'd run across the field to one side and then put the brakes on. It would take him 15 minutes to stop, and
Hmm.
somehow defenders would slide right on past him and never even touch him half the time. And then he'd start running back in the middle of the field again, and then he'd
Yeah.
find her. I'm like, how did you miss this guy? He's a million feet tall. He's 250 pounds. It's just so funny how guys couldn't tackle him. And
Hmm.
it wasn't even like obviously he's big and he would just shrug guys off, and that was great. But
Yeah.
he would make people miss behind the line. I'm like, how did you miss him? Like, what are you
Oh
doing?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so
I was
funny.
watching highlights at
Oh my
lunch today, and there
god.
was some like a ton of those plays from the Cardinals Super Bowl.
Yeah.
There's one where um Terrell Suggs like comes at him. Oh no, Terrell Suggs comes from behind. I don't
Yep.
even remember because the way the play ends up is so weird.
Mhm.
But the point is that Suggs ends up like in front of him,
Mhm.
and they're like basically fighting over the ball, and
Right.
Ben is able to wrench it away, turn around, and then like flick it out of bounds.
Yeah.
So it's an incomplete, but like it should have been dead to rights a sack, which is
Y
just insane
it's
to watch.
it's amazing to me that he's been sacked more than anybody else ever has, and he still broke so many sacks.
Yeah.
Like he could have an insurmountable lead in that category if he got sacked as many times as he actually should have been sacked. But I don't know. I mean, the way he played, especially whenever he was younger, it was just so it was so unique in the way that because he wasn't like this dual threat quarterback. He wasn't this guy that was like this supreme athlete that made guys. He was just back there just making crap happen. It was just so funny to watch.
Yeah.
And especially looking back on it now, it's just so comical compared to what we have now. But
yeah. Speaking of making crap happen, like the thing that when I was watching these highlights, like, and I tweeted this, that Ben is really like the pioneer of the F it receiver down there somewhere.
Yeah, and it didn't matter who. He just threw it.
Yeah,
man.
Because of those escapability plays, but like it would be, Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Jericho Cotchery. During that time, like Marcus
crazy.
Wheaton, Martavis Bryant. I mean Juju to an extent, but yeah, I mean just and a lot of them are Antonio Brown, obviously, and so many. Like there was that one against the Browns. I want to say in 2017. Where it's like towards the end of the game, they need a first down. He just threw it in the coverage,
and Brown came down with it somehow.
Yeah,
he had supreme confidence in his receivers at all times. It felt like it didn't matter who it was. Like he's like, if someone's down there, I'll throw it. I don't care. And it worked out. So the amount of times it worked,
it should not have worked out. The number of times it worked out,
no sense. It was unbelievable. Imagine that's one thing I do kind of wish is imagine that style of Ben with Claypool. And some of these guys, as much as Claypool is inconsistent with his ability to make impressive catches, some of the plays he makes now with balls that aren't nearly as good as the ones Ben used to throw.
It makes me very sad for what Martavis Bryant should have been.
He was such him too.
I think his nickname was Alien because he was literally otherworldly with his
crazy
athleticism. Given
that catch where he had the ball out
in the play in the Bengals wildcard game,
stupid,
and the 94-yard go route against the Bengals.
Yeah,
where
everyone.
It's against an old Leon Hall, but he just left Leon Hall 30 yards behind.
He wasn't even in the screen after the play. After the throw was made. It was crazy.
It was really sad how that situation ended with him. But I think some of my other favorite moments are the back-to-back 6 touchdown games in 14.
That was such a wild season in general.
I think that middle part of that season was peak Ben.
That was peak Ben. That was Ben at the height of his actual ability as a passer.
Yeah,
where he just could not miss. It felt like everything was just easy to him. The receivers and him were just on this next level amount of synchronization. It was
unfair for sure.
Stupid.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that I wrote about it in the overall ode to the Ben Roethlisberger era article we posted on Steelers ATV about he really had 2 different careers in the sense of how he played football, right? He had the early career success with Super Bowls and just making stuff happen and being that improvisational type of guy. And then in the early 2010s through the end of about 2018, he was one of the most prolific passers, really.
Yeah, it's basically like the Arians years, the Haley years, and then the Dark Ages.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. But the way he was such a prolific passer in the middle to end of his career up until the last few years, where he had 2 really truly different styles of play and just the way he approached the game, which is really
I mean, even in his last season before the injury, I think he led the league in pass attempts. I think he led passing yards. They were throwing the ball all the time.
Yeah, ton.
And it was insane. But I think trying to think of the other ones, there's the Christmas game against the Ravens.
Yes, I was about to say that.
Really, every game against the Ravens, except there's a handful of blowouts in there that are kind of random.
But for the most part, this was. I mean, I think this was maybe I don't remember. I don't think it was the same year as the Christmas Day because I think it was 2016 or 15, one of the two. But it was. Either 16 or 17, I think, where it was the 42-39 game or whatever that was, where it was just a back and forth.
I think that's 17 because then TJ ended that game with the.
That's right. Yeah, 17 then. Yeah, so just so many games that you can even if you just look at the Ravens game, like you said, it's just unbelievable games, just in NFL history, let alone just rivalry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly when I was watching some of these highlights, I was honestly, if they really wanted to activate Ben, they needed to bust out an old set of uniforms and.
Yeah,
they're not the ones that you're gonna think I'm gonna say.
Okay,
I'm saying the ones with the yellow helmets.
Oh, yep.
Because those were always night games, and Ben always played awesome in those uniforms.
He did, yeah.
Incredible consistency, and I like the Bumblebees, kind of ironically, mostly because they are very good to me in Madden because I think they mess up people I play just because of how visually disconcerting they are.
Weird it is. Yeah.
And like the new like the color rushes are great. You know, they've
Mhm.
been good in those too. The new throwbacks, like where it's like the
Yeah.
70s style. Oh, like they're
Yeah.
good.
They're fine, but
But Ben in those yellow helmet uniforms, and like when James Harrison was at the height of his powers, truly
unbelievable
elite
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah.
So
Awesome
if they really
stuff.
wanted to guarantee a win, that's what I would have pulled out. But
Yeah, but
they want to at least
they
make it
should have just let
interesting.
Ben pick everything. Like, yeah, you want what uniforms you want, what
The,
you know.
the really good memes are the ones where it's like, you know, Ben is Luke Skywalker at the end of episode 4, or Luke, you turned off your targeting computer. What's wrong? And it's Bat Canada just being like, Ben, can you hear me? And Ben's like,
Screw you, man.
Screw you.
I'm
I'm
not
doing this
about
my own way.
That's the thing is like I wonder like because Tomlin's comments earlier about like would he wouldn't be opposed to letting Ben have the keys out. You have to assume that this game and probably next one Ben is going to have as much say as he wants in what's happening, right? Or at least we hope.
Yeah.
Like because otherwise this game it's not going to be fun to watch this game or the Ravens game if we're just going to just see what we've been seeing. It's just I'd rather let Ben just do whatever he wants to do at this point, especially with the odds being so low we can make the playoffs even with winning out. Just let him go out there and play the game the way he wants to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll kind of get into the preview, which I had previewed on a solo episode. But I don't think that got published because of the holidays and everything. So
yeah,
we'll kind of break it down. Yeah, we'll break it down again. So in terms of what I'm expecting here, like obviously the Browns are banged up. They don't really have a ton to play for. Baker Mayfield is kind of just playing really poorly.
Yeah, he's had a rough go.
And so I think that on the defensive side, the Browns are going to try to run the ball. I expect the Steelers to stay in base defense, do everything they can to stop it, force Baker to throw outside the numbers in the intermediate area of the field. And, you know, I think it's not something he can consistently do successfully. So as long as they did a good job stopping the run early in the season. Granted, they were a lot healthier. So we'll have to see. And the Browns are missing Kareem Hunt, so that will, you know, maybe make them a little less effective. But I think that, you know, as we've said for the last few weeks, you know, except against the Chiefs, stopping the run is really the number one priority.
Yeah, like we have to make the Browns at least have to throw the ball a little bit. We can't let them just run up and down the field like they are capable of doing because they don't want to have Baker have to make any plays at this point. You can tell, like, because of, you know, whether it's just ineffectiveness or his injury still bothering, he just hasn't been the player that they wanted him to be. And if you can make him beat you, he probably isn't going to do it right now. So
yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of they're hoping that this game plan can kind of lead Baker to have a Tannehill-esque game, with a lot of turnovers from a few weeks ago. In terms of matchups that I'd be concerned about, or I guess I would be favoring would be TJ Watt over whoever they're starting at right tackle, Blake Hance or James Hudson.
Yep.
Ben TJ's had an extra day of rest.
I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think Jack Conklin is back. I think he's on season-ending IR. So they're definitely going.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're gonna have to go with the backup there. In terms of everybody else, I mean, just in general, the interior run defense versus this interior offensive line is going to be a bit of a doozy.
Yeah, right now we don't match up well with really anybody. I mean, outside of Hayward still trying to do everything he can personally, there's just not a lot of juice there at defensive line for us right now. So
I do feel good about the secondary and their ability to kind of limit this passing game. So, you know, I think that's, you know, they don't really have they lost Odell and not like he was doing much before, but, you know, they have Jarvis Landry's an underneath threat who has given the Steelers some trouble before, but he's not a huge playmaker. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been seemingly inconsistent. And then the tight ends are, you know, I think Njoku's kind of the big threat that they'll need to go after. And I think that's kind of will be Edmonds' and Fitzpatrick's responsibility. They are missing Arthur Mollett due to COVID. I forgot that. But again, I don't think they're going to be needing him much because they assume they'll stay in base. And if they need a slot, they'll put Witherspoon in and bump Sutton inside. So
yeah, that's what I would guess.
Yeah, so I think they're set up pretty well there. On the other side of the ball, like I said, I think this is kind of a let Ben cook game, especially with the depleted secondary across from him. Their defensive line is kind of getting back towards healthy, especially if Malik Jackson plays. You know, Myles Garrett is obviously there. Jadeveon Clowney. I know they just lost Takaris McKinley, but Tommy Togiai, they got some good interior guys, Malik McDowell too. So, you know, this might not be the game to try to run. So just kind of go for one of those crazy passing games.
Honestly, like I think that's the best matchup is to try to take advantage of their secondary, especially because, like you said, with the rush offense has just been so mediocre almost every game, and like
Mhm.
Najee is just kind of forced to try to make something happen, and normally doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So obviously, I want to see them try to at least make it something they have to worry about or think about a little bit, but
Mhm.
I don't want them to try to lean on it because I just don't think this team is able to win that way right now.
Yeah, in my mind, this might be a pass to set up the run game
Yeah,
because, and like especially getting Freiermuth back is huge
that's
because
huge.
how he
Yeah,
can attack those safeties. I imagine they'll kind of try to put somebody where Denzel Ward normally is and kind of just not throw that way because, for all their faults, Denzel Ward is an excellent corner.
he's been great. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would kind of just try to avoid him at all costs. In terms of, but the one matchup I am extremely concerned about is Myles Garrett versus Dan Moore, especially
Yeah.
with I think I'm not sure if they activated Kevin Dotson at this point. He's been hurt for a while. I'm not sure if he's going to play. But regardless, I don't think putting Dan Moore on an island like they did a few weeks ago against Myles Garrett is the best strategy.
I don't want them to feel like that's what they should do. At least I think that they need to give him help just for the sake of because the problem with Garrett is like not only is he just a great player, he's always a turnover threat. He's always trying to get the ball out and try to get strip sacks, and I could see that happening very easily. Ben
Yeah.
has kind of had trouble with ball security at times. I just need them to not let him get home on those like last second plays where Ben's trying to get the ball and he can't do it in time because that's how we end up with some fumbles.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the interior defensive line for the Browns in terms of pass rushers is solid. I think they are starting J.C. Hassenauer tonight, so he'll have to hold up there, which I would say he's better at that than run blocking, and that's not saying he's great at either, but of the
Yeah,
two, that's where I'd be more inclined to. And like I said, tight ends, inside receivers against safeties, and backup slot corners is where I'd attack in terms of this offense. With that, let's get into our picks. Like I said earlier, the Steelers are now favored by 1. I got them at +3, so I'm feeling quite good about that bet. And then the over/under is 43. So Shane, let's hear your prediction.
really, the question for myself right now
Do we mush
is,
ourselves?
yeah, do I just go for broke and be like, listen, Ben's gonna light it up and it's gonna be great, and we're all gonna be happy tonight, and then we'll have to deal with the consequences of our actions later.
That's a
Because
future you problem.
exactly, it's like I'll deal with the consequences later. I'm gonna say 27-21 Steelers.
Okay. I'll be a little more bold in
Okay.
terms of margin. I will say I'll be bolder in both. I'll say 31-13 Steelers.
Ooh, big
I
one. I
think
see. I
I
like it though. I
I
do.
think this team is it looks freaking cold.
It's like 22 degrees.
It's
Yeah,
like
it's
and
about
then like a
22.
real feel of like 10.
Yeah,
Uh
it's one of those games
I
for
think this
sure.
team is going to be really pumped up to
I
fight for
hope
Ben to
so.
give him a
Goodness
good send
great.
off.
I
I
think
think Ben is going to. I don't know. I don't really know how much what light it up means for him at this point, but I think this is going to be a really good game for him. I think that they you know send the season off at least at Heinz Field on a high note. I think they maybe finally get a defensive touchdown or something like that.
that'd be great. Yeah.
And Ben throws for maybe 2 touchdowns, maybe 3. So I'm just really hoping for a decent game here so I can watch next week and not really care.
Honestly, that's the thing, right? It's like
And even
especially
like kind of
because
hope for a
yeah.
loss for draft pick purposes.
Honestly, yeah, that's the worst part about it is like well, I think that what time do the Steelers play next week? I forget.
I think they said 4:30 or the 4:25
So
slot.
it's a 4:25 slot. Will we know by that time whether or not we're gonna have a
Maybe
shot?
it's not, and maybe I was wrong about that because
No, it's 1 p.m. It's 1
it is
p.m.
1. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
more sense because they would probably do that and then have the Colts Jaguars either be at the same time
They're
or
1 o'clock. Yeah,
they're
Colts
okay, so they're at
Jags
the
are 1
same
o'clock.
time. So and then they have the
Chargers
Chargers.
Raiders are
That's
Sunday
the night
night.
game, so
So
that is the decider really.
yeah, so
But if the Colts win, which I expect them to, they're kind of out anyways. But
yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, but we'll see.
yeah, but that'll do it for us for this live episode. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm not sure if we'll put this out on the podcast feed because it'll be kind of pointless.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but we'll
but I
definitely
see
do
that we did
yeah.
get a decent amount of viewers, so that is nice
Yeah.
to have some people tuning in tonight.
Awesome. So
But in the meantime, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we hope to have you back next time.